ሰላም ተመልካቾቻችን እንደምን ሰብታችኋል እንግዲህ የዛሬ ፕሮግራማችን የሚያተኩረው መጽሐፍ ላይ ነው ደራሲያን ላይ ነው የተለያዩ መጽሐፍ ደራሲዎችን ይዘንላችሁ እንቀርባለን ከመጽሐፍ ጋር ደግሞ የተያያዘ ቴክኖሎጂ ደግሞ አለ ከሱ ጋር ደግሞ አያይዘን ወደ በኋላ ቆይታ እናደርጋለን እስቲ የመጀመሪያ ጸሐፊዎችን ደራሲዎችን ላስተዋውቃችሁ ወይዘሮ ሉዋም ተስፋዬ እና ቆንጂዬ ልጇ ኢዛቤላ ተስፋዬ እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ ከነሱ ጋር የማረጋው ቆይታ በእንግሊዝኛ ይሆናል ምክንያቱም ኢዛቤላ አማርኛ ትማራለች ወደፊት but for now ቆይታችንን ከሷ ጋር የዚህ ሀገር ተወልዳ የምታድግ ልጅ ናት በእንግሊዝኛ እናረጋለና ለሁላችን እንደው መከታተል እንዲመቸን ከሉዋሜም ጋር ቆይታውን በእንግሊዝኛ እናረጋለን ማለት ነው so welcome to the both of you
thank you
so your first book Luame, you've been on our program before. You do a lot of motivational programs on your IG, on Facebook. You have a nice following, a good group of women that support you in everything that is Luame. And now you just ventured into another.
Yeah.
Between Two Worlds. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I have a lot of respect and admiration for people who write books because it takes time. It's a commitment. It takes a lot out of you, especially if you've never done it before. I can only imagine. So we'll have a conversation about that. And also the same thing for you. It's writing a book is not an easy thing. So you'll tell me all about your wonderful book, which I have right here. It is called The Ghost of a Friend?
The Ghost Friend, yeah.
The Ghost Friend.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Luame, Between the Two Worlds, what inspired this book? I enjoyed it, by the way.
Oh, I'm so glad
it's
to hear that.
It's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
What inspired it?
So, as you know, I was born and raised here in the U.S., but I spend a lot of my summers going home to Ethiopia and Eritrea. And when I was 8, we moved to Ethiopia.
Okay.
And I lived with my grandmother. And the story is her life story.
So it's a fiction.
It's fiction. It's a historical fiction book.
Okay.
But the basis of the book is based on my grandmother's life.
So she used to tell you her stories?
Yes, she did, yeah.
So just give us like a key theme or the message or, you know, it's based on her story, but the theme is what? What would you say it is?
So here's why I even started it to begin. Why I even wrote it to begin with. In our family, we have a lot of history that's been written and told about my grandfather, my great grandfather, my father, and there was never a portion told for all the women in the family.
Yeah.
Never. They were never held to a higher standard, basically. And these women helped these men become who they are, right? So I wanted. For my daughters especially, I wanted them to see my grandmother and the women in our family in a different light. So the story is about a woman who basically takes life into her own hands, who society wants to conform into a completely different way, and she wants to do something completely different. It embarks her journey and how she finds out things about herself from the past, things about herself in the future, and just her present as well.
Yeah, and I guess it's centered, you know, there are very strong women in the story, like Bella, you know, who
main
is
character, yeah.
The main character. There is her grandmother, Mama, which I can see, you know, her and many of the grandmothers that we have.
Yeah.
And then also the princesses. This is in the 50s and the 60s, a completely different Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I guess to just continue on that conversation, a lot of the independence that we have right now
today,
to pursue careers, to pursue higher education, to do all of those things were not available to these women. And so, you know, tell me why you chose to portray the story in the way that you did.
I wanted to inspire the woman of today to follow her dream, to go after what she wants, even if she's a mother, you know, and she has kids and she just doesn't think it's possible for her anymore.
Yeah.
I wanted her to say, oh my gosh, if these women can do it 50, 60, 70 years ago, I can do it today.
Right.
That was the main focal point.
It's a great message. There's a lot of historical references in your book. So tell me about the research that you did for that. I mean, the cities, the names of the cities and the neighborhoods. A lot of, to me, you have to do a lot of research to be able to kind of pinpoint all of these places. So what type of research did you do for that?
So the storyline obviously was her stories, right? Her gathering, her stories that she told me. But the historical pinpoints, I took my time. We visited Ethiopia in 2019 and Eritrea. So I used a lot of the stuff that we saw then. I put that in the book. And then in 2020, at the end of 2020, my grandma passed away. So because of COVID, she died in Eritrea, but because of COVID, we couldn't get in. And my mother was in Ethiopia at the time. So when I went to visit her, I kind of took my time. I met with the owner of Castelli. I sat down and talked to her. I visited the palace, Menelik's palace, went through, did the whole tour and saw different things. And then I tried to do the drive, but we couldn't. From Addis Ababa to Dese or to different places that she went through. But we couldn't. But I did talk to different historians so that they could help me. Other than that, Google. Google was my best friend.
It has to be.
Yeah.
So what were some of the challenges in writing this book? I would imagine, given, I guess, the fact that you live here and you're writing a story about Ethiopia and Eritrea, I would think that's a major challenge. But what else? What are the other challenges of publishing your first book?
I wanted the book to be for many people, and I think when you try to be for too many people, you end up kind of being for no one. So that was challenging. I didn't want to, in the beginning, I found myself being, stopping myself almost from writing certain things because I didn't want to offend anyone or say the wrong thing. And then also, it was an emotional roller coaster because it's so near and dear to my heart, and I didn't want anyone to come at me in a different angle and say something mean or something. And I can take that from me, but being that it was from my grandmother's story, I don't think it took a long time to be ready to even face the limelight.
Here's one of the reasons that I love that you even sat down to write this book. I feel like the stories of women in Ethiopia is never really told from the perspective that it needs to be told. We see so much movies in this country. I've read so many books and I hear a lot of people's stories and I'm like, our stories are just as valuable. There's still a lot that we can learn from, and maybe we don't really spend enough time sitting down and asking our elders about their story. I'm sure these women have something to say to all of us. So that's really one of the reasons why I really appreciated what you tried to do here.
Yeah, and it's funny you said that because one of the readers, when she left me a review on Amazon, she said that in our culture, we don't write our stories. We tell our stories, but we don't write them. And because of that, history is not told pretty much, right? It's not kept. And when I was writing it, I thought of my generation, who we were born here, and we don't know what Ethiopia and Eritrea was like back then. And so I wanted the reader, who was my age, to read it and say, "Wow, this is where I come from," right? For my mother's age, my grandmother's age, I wanted them to read it. The immigrants that had to leave because of civil war and because of different reasons. I wanted them to read it and say, wow, I wanted them to reminisce, to think and say, wow, this was my home. And then for Africans in general, I'm so tired of being in the news with famine and poverty and just, always bad things, always ugly messes. This is a story that it's positive.
It's positive. It shows that their lives mattered, their life had meaning, their life had purpose, and then they lived in a country that appreciated who they were at the time, maybe did not give them the position and the opportunities and the resources that they needed, but we had a life. It was a life, and I love that. So I'm going to come back to you, but I want to talk to Miss Isabella. So Isabella, you're 14 years old.
Yes, I'm 14 years old.
Yeah.
Freshman in high school.
Freshman in high school, the firstborn.
Yeah.
What motivated you or inspired you to write a book?
Well, I've always loved reading, and I've always loved writing. And I've written a lot of short stories, a lot of children's stories, but I never finished any of them. And this is the first one that I actually followed through with and finished because of my dad. My dad was my main inspiration for this one and my main motivation. I read him the story, and he was like, you have to finish it. You have to finish it. You have to publish it. You have to. So he was my main motivation, but the books I read and the books I used to read were my main inspiration.
So give us a little synopsis of the book. What is the story about?
So the story is about a girl named Eliza. She recently moved from London to New York, and in her town in New York, she finds all these things and all these weird things all relating back to ghosts.
Okay.
And one day she gets transported into this ghost world, and she has to make friends, and she has to go on adventures to find her way out to get back to her family.
So that's the thing. That's the story. Is
Yeah.
it? Do you want it to be a series, or is it just a one book?
Well, it has to be a series because I ended the first book on a cliffhanger. So it kind of has to. So it's going to be a series. Yeah.
What was the writing process for you?
The writing process. Okay. Well, I was 9 when I wrote it. So.
Oh, you started at 9.
Yeah, I started it at
Okay.
9. It took a long time to publish and finish, but
Okay.
even though it's so small, but. It was really, honestly, I can't even say that I remember because it was so long ago. But all I remember is that I would come home from school, and I had no responsibility besides school, music, and sports. So I just wrote.
You mean you don't have your
script
mommy?
writing.
Is that what it is?
I do, but I have chores and stuff, you know.
That's true. That's true. I'm just
Yeah.
messing with you. Okay, so you published your first book. How does that feel?
I feel very accomplished. I feel
Okay.
very good.
Good.
But it was hard.
What was the hardest part?
Looking back, especially the editing process, looking back at it and because I was 13 when I first, they told me I was publishing, and I was really excited and stuff, but I had to edit the book, obviously. And looking back at it, I don't talk that way now. It's very different dialogue because I was so young. So I have to remember that it's for children. It's a children's book, so I can't put big words and especially with writing the second book is really challenging because I have to keep the integrity of a children's book.
That's true. And what did you learn about yourself through writing this book?
I learned responsibility mostly because especially during publishing, my parents paid for everything obviously because I'm a minor, so I don't have any money. But they told me I can't. They can't do it for me. They're not gonna do anything. And I took a really big break in between the publishing process. I took a 6-month break where I just didn't do anything because I had school, I had other responsibilities. I didn't want to.
Right.
But I learned that I have to take responsibility for my own stuff, my own work.
Well, you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
So, Luami, let me come to you. Would you say that writing this book changed you? And you're revisiting a history. Obviously, it's a fiction, but still, it's based on your grandmother's story. Would you say publishing a book changed you? Writing a book changed you?
I wouldn't say it changed me. I would say that it gave me a whole different level of respect for authors.
Right.
Because it is a lot of work and a lot of tears, a lot of sweat goes into putting your work out there. And yeah, I have a whole new level of respect.
So the hardest part, would you say, is it publishing it? Is it writing it? What was the biggest challenge for you?
Believe it or not, the writing was the fun part. It's the editing. Oh my gosh, the editing was...
That's true.
Was terrible. It was hard.
Yeah.
Very, very hard. And then also finding the right publisher. I self-published.
And why did you do that, by the way? It's your first book.
Yeah, it is my first. And I made a lot of mistakes. It was a huge learning lesson. But I went that route because of the fact that I couldn't find a publisher that we just jived together. So yeah, a lot of extra money, a lot of extra sweat went into it because I had to self-publish.
So I guess, just to be able to share, because I'm sure a lot of women would say, oh, I feel like I have a story to tell. I feel like I want to write a book, but I don't even know where to begin. I don't know what to do. Based on your own personal experience, what advice would you give them?
Just start. Just start. What I did that really helped me was I stayed consistent and wrote 1,000 words 3 times a week. Just 3,000 words a week. If you finish that consistently, that's 12,000 words a month.
Right.
And I just built on it and built on it. And it took me some time, but it finished.
Right. So where could people find this book? Isabel, where can we find your book?
So right now I'm in the last stage of getting it out there and marketing and everything, but once it's out, Amazon and local bookstores like Barnes & Noble and Kramer, stuff like that.
And then the next series hopefully will come out in a couple of years, or we're going to have to hold you to it.
Not years.
Because you're going to high school now. It's going to be a different challenge.
Yeah, really challenging, but I'll get it done in a few months.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Oh, also, apart from the Ghost Friend, I write poetry I do poems and like spoken word and stuff like that.
That's
so I'm also
wonderful.
publishing a poetry book soon.
That's wonderful.
She's busy.
She's. I would say. And where can people find this book, Luam? Is it going to come out soon, or can they buy it on your website?
It's out on Amazon. It's out on Amazon and on my website, luami.com. And we're now working to get it into the local bookstores and also internationally.
Let me ask you, did your mother read the book?
My mom read it and my aunts read it. And
what did they say to you? What was the feedback from them?
They loved it except for some of the passion scenes. They were not so happy of that.
I mean, it's life. It has to happen, you know.
So but they don't want to see it. I'm like, I don't want to think of my mother in that sense. So
it happened though.
I know. Exactly.
Can I ask you, because I was sitting here, you know, when you're narrating the book, and you know, it felt like, you know, your grandmother kind of sat you down, all of her grandchildren, and she was telling the stories to you. Was there a way, like, how was she like in real life outside of your book? Is this how it happened?
This is exactly what she did, yeah. When I was 8 and we moved into her home, she would sit my sister and I down every night after dinner and tell us stories. And, you know, as an adult, I asked her, why did you emphasize so much on sharing your past with us? And we thought it was like a movie. And she told me it's because she never got a chance to tell her girls the story, and she never wanted to make the same mistake with us.
And she's very wise, because I wish, now that I think about it, I mean, I've lost my grandparents many, many years ago, but I don't think I had an opportunity to even think about, I want to sit down, you know, at your feet and you tell me what your story is. So if you can ask me right now, who was your grandmother, I couldn't tell you. I mean, even both my father's side and my mother's side, and it's unfortunate. I wish, you know, this is why, hopefully our viewers will take this opportunity.
Yeah, sharing is
share, you know, sit down with your grandparents. Don't just look at them as somebody that's, you know, just there in your life and old. I'm sure they have stories to tell, and make sure you validate their stories. Make sure they know that it's worth listening to, right? That's what I take away from your book, Luam, and thank you for writing it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. እንግዲህ ተመልካቾቻችን ከረፍት ቆይታችን በኋላ እንመለሳለን። ከኛ ጋር ቆዩ። ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ከረፍት ቆይታችን ተመልሰናል። እንግዲህ የተለያዩ ደራሲዎችን እያስተዋወቅናችሁ ነው። I hope መጽሐፋቸውን የመግዛት የማንበብ እድሉ ይደርሳችኋል ብዬ አምናለሁ። አሁን ደግሞ እስከ ዳር አስማረ የነፍስ አፎች የሚል መጽሐፍ ፈርስት ታይም የመጀመሪያ መጽሐፍሽ ነው። እንኳን ደስ አለሽ።
በጣም አመሰግናለሁ።
ለምን መሰለሽ እኔ ደስ ነው የሚለኝ እንደዚህ አንድ ሰው አይምሮ ውስጥ ያለውን ሐሳብ በሐሳብ ብቻ ሳይሆን በተግባር አድርጎት ፈጽሞት የሚከፈለውን ዋጋ ከፍሎ ግብ ላይ ማድረስ ሲችል በጣም ማደንቀው ነገር ነው። በትንሹም በትልቁ በማንኛውም እና የመጀመሪያ መጽሐፍሽን ፐብሊሽ በማድረግሽ እንኳን ደስ አለሽ ልልሽ ፈልጋለሁ። የስንኝ ተረኮችና ስኬቾች ስብስብ ይላል። ኢንትረስቲንግ ቆንጆ መጽሐፍ ነው። አንደኛ ምን አነሳሳሽ? እንደው ትንሽ እንተዋወቅሽ ልበልና መጀመሪያ ከዛ ስላንቺ ትንሽ ነግረሽኝ ይሄን ደግሞ ለመጽሐፍ ምን እንዳነሳሳሽ ብትነግሪኝ ደስ ይለኛል።
እሺ በጣም ስለጋበሽኝ በመጀመሪያ በጣም ነው ማመሰግነው።
Of course.
ምን አነሳሳሽ ለሚለው ከልጅነቴ ጀምሮ መጽሐፍ ማንበብም መጽሐፍም በጣም ነው የምወደው። ማንበብ በጣም ነው የሚያስደስተኝና ደራሲ እንደምሆን ነው የማውቀው ሁሌ።
ዋው እሺ።
እና እኔ ደስ የሚለኝ ነገር ደስ ለሚላቸው እንደምጽፍ አቅ ነበር ሁሉ ጊዜ።
አስፈንድፋል። እሺ
በጣም ስለምወድ ነው የጻፍኩት ማለት ነው።
ባክግራውንድሽ ጆርናሊዝም ትምህርት ቤት ነው ተመሽ? እሺ ትንገሪኝ ትንሽ ስለዛ።
የተወለድኩት ጎንደር ነው ያደግኩት ደግሞ ሐረር ነው። ከዛ በኋላ ወደ አዋሳ ዩኒቨርሲቲ ሄጄ የስነ ጽሁፍ የመጀመሪያ ዲግሪን በስነ ጽሁፍ አገኘው። ከዛ አፍተር ግራጁዌሽን ለአንድ አመት አካባቢ ሪፖርተር ጋዜጣ እንደ ሪፖርተር ሆኜ ሰራው።
እሺ
ከዛ ወዲህ መጣው ማለት ነው።
የነፍስ አፎች ምን ማለት አርስቱን እስቲ ለምን እንደዚህ ብለሽ ሰየምሽው?
የነፍስ አፎች እሺ ነፍስ አፍ ቢኖራት ምን ትለናለች? በስጋችን ሳይሆን በነፍሳችን ብናወራ ኖሮ ነፍሳችን ምንድን ነበር የሚሉት ሞስትሊ ምን ማስበውን ለብቻሽ የምታሰላስዩ ነገር ነው ለማውጣት ብዙ ካራክተሮቼ እንደዛ ናቸው ለብቻቸው የሚያወጣነጥኑ ናቸው መሰለኝና አዎ በስጋችን ሳይሆን በነፍሳችን ምን እንላለን ምንድነው የምናወራው ምንድነው የምናስበው የሚለውን ነገር ለማሳየት ነው
እስቲ መጽሐፍሽ ፖኤትሪ ነገር ግጥም አለው አጫጭር ንግግሮች ታሪኮች አሉበት አይደለ እንዴት አሰባሰብሻቸው ለምን እንደዚህ አይነት መጽሐፍ ለመጽሐፍ አሰብሽ
በጣም ረጅም ጊዜ ወስዶብኛል ለማመን ማለት እንደነገርኩሽ ከልጅነት ጀምሮ ነው መጽሐፍ ማንበብ በጣም የሚያስደስተኝ ነገር ነው ግን አይበቃኝም እጽፋለሁ ሁሌ ግን ለሰዎች የሚደርስ ነገር ነው ብሎ ራስ ላይ ማመን ትልቅ ችግር ነበረ እና አስቀምጣቸዋለሁ ሁሌም አልነበረም ይጣፋሉ ይቀመጣሉ የሆነ ቀን ደራሲ እንደምሆን የሆነ ቀን መጽሐፍ እንደሚኖረኝ በጣም እርግጠኛ ነኝ ግን መቼ አላቅም ምክንያቱም በቃ አላምንም ማለት ይሄ በቃል ለሰው ለራስ በጣም እና ፋይናሊ ግን አንድ በጣም የማከብራቸው ሰዎች አንብበው ሲገረሙ ሲደሰቱ ሳይ ኦኬ ምናልባት ይሄ ነው ታይሙ አልኩ ማለት ነው
ኦኬ
እና ብዙ ጊዜ አልፈጀብኝም አመት አካባቢ ከያሉበት ሰበሰብኳቸው በደንብ ባየኋቸው ድጋሚ እንዴ ታተመ
ማለት ነው መጽሐፍ ውስጥ ካሉት ሐሳቦች አንዳንዴ እንደ መንፈሳዊ ነገርም ነክ ነገሮች አሉበት አለ ኢንትረስቲንግ አይዲያዎች ታነሻለሽ ከ spirituality I mean it's not የሃይማኖት ነገር ሳይሆን አሁን ለምሳሌ ጠላቶቻችሁን ውደዱ በሚለው ነገር ታነሽና የሆነ ነገር ጽፈያለሽና እስቲ ንገሪኝ ኢንስፓየር ካረጉሽ ነገሮች ይሄን ነው በቲ መጽሐፍ ቅዱስ በጣም ወዳለሁ እንደሚገባኝ በደንብ አንብቤዋለሁ ማለት አልችልም ግን በጣም ኢምፕረስ ያደርገኛል በደንብ ወዳለሁኝና መንፈሳዊነትም ትንሽ የሚለይ ይመስለኛል ከሃይማኖታዊነት መንፈሳዊነት ቢገር እና የተለየ ነገር ነው ብያምናለሁና ጠላታችሁን ወደዱ መጽሐፍ ላይ ያለ ቃል ነው አይደል እና ሁላችንም ሃይማኖት አለን ቤተክርስቲያን ሄዳለን መጽሐፍ ቅዱስ እናነባለን እና እንከተላለን ቀድሜ እንደነገርኩሽ ምን እናሰላስለው ውስጣችን ያለው ነገር ምንድነው ነው ምንለው ለመምሰል ምን ሞክረው ነገሮች አሉ ጠላታችን ወደዱ ስንል እንወዳለን ወይ እንላለን ለየብቻችን ለምሳሌ እናስበዋለን ምናልባት ግን ፕራክቲካሊ እንወዳለን ብንወድ ምናያቸው በጣም ትልልቅ ችግሮች ሀገራችን ላይ ይመጡ ነበር ግን ሁላችንም ሁዱድ ቤተክርስቲያን ሄዳለን ትልልቅ አምልኮ እናደርጋለን እና በደንብ ያሳስበኛል እንመስላለን እንጂ አንሆንምና አንዳንድ ካራክተሮች አሉ እንመስላለን እንጂ አንሆንም በጣም ባዝኖ ያያየኋቸው እና ደፍረንም አንናገራቸውም ሃይማኖታዊ ነን ቤተክርስቲያን ሄዳለን ጠላቶቻችንን እንወዳለን ትንሽ እኮ ነው ጠላት መውደድ እንችላለን እንሰጣለን ስጡ በሚለን ልክ እንሰጣለን እና መንፈሳዊነት እንዲማርከኛል አው በጣም እንደነገርኩሽ የነፍስ አፍ ነው ነፍሶች ምንድነው የሚሉት ነፍሳችን ከስጋ ፍላጎታችን ውጪ ስጋችን ትንሽ ስግብግብ ነው ለራሱ ያዳላል ነፍሳችን ግን እንደ አይደለም የተሰራቸው አይደል ቅን የእግዚአብሔር ቅንጣቢ ናት አይደል እና ይጋጫሉ ሰው ስጋዊ ፍላጎታችንን አሸንፈን ነፍሳችን ምትለውን ለመስማት እንጎብዝ ነው ልክ ነው ሶ መጽሐፉ ይሄንን አንብበው ሰዎች ከዚህ ምን ቢወስዱ ደስ ይለኛል ታያለሽ ያውስጥ ናቹራሊ ተፈጥሯችንን ራሳቸውን እንዲሰሙ ወደ ራሳቸው እንዲያዩ እኔ ያስባለሁ ሁሉ ጊዜ ልንሰጥ እንጂ ልንቀበል አልመጣንም ወደዚህ ዓለምና ሰጪዎች ነን ከሁሉም እንገዝፋለን ከሁሉ ተፈጥሮ እግዚአብሔር እንደ አምሳላችን እንፍጠር አይደል ያለው ስለዚህ ከጨረቃም ከፀሐይም ከንፋስም እንረቃለን ስለዚህ ወደ ራሳችን ብንመለከት ምን ሰጠው ብዙ አለ ወደ ራሳችን ይጎትታል ማንበብ በራሱ ወደ ራስሽ እንድትመሪ ነው የሚያደርገውና ያ ወደ ራሳቸው እንዲሄዱ የበለጠውን እንዲመርጡ እሱ ነው ሐሳብሽ ኦኬ ሶ የመጀመሪያ መጽሐፍን ጽፎ ማሳተም ቀላል ነገር አይደለም ትልቁ ከበደኛልሽው ነገር ምንድነው ይሄን እንግዲህ ምን ብለሽ እንድትነገኝ ፈልጋለሁ መሰለሽ እንዳንቺ በልባችሁ መጽሐፍ የመጽሐፍ ፍላጎት ያላቸው ግን አንቺ ከራስሽ ጋር እንደታገልሽው እኔኮ በቂ አይደለሁም ማን እኔን መጽሐፍ ያነባዋል ምናምን ብለው ከራሳቸው ጋር ግብግብ የሚፈጥሩ ሰዎች አሉ እነሱን ኢንካሬጅ እንድታረጊ ብዬ ነውና ከባዱ ፓርት ምንድን ነበር እንዴት ተቋቋምሽው መጽሐፍ ስትጽፊ
ሁሉም ነገር ቻሌንጂንግ ነው ኦፍ ኮርስ በተለይ ድሪምሽን እውነት ለማድረግ ህልምሽን እውነት ለማድረግ ይከብዳል በራስ ማመን ነው ትልቁ ነገር ውጪ ብዙ አትቺም ብዙ ልክ አይደለም አሉ ብዙ ድምጾች ብዙ ኔጌቲቭ ኢነርጂዎች አሉ በተቻለ መጠን ራስን ማጎበስ ራስ ላይ ማመን ነው እንደነገርኩሽ ነው ትልቁ ቻሌንጅ የነበረው ራሴ ላይ ማመን ነው የነበረውና ራስ ላይ ስታምኚ የኛ ኢነርጂ ከሁሉም ይበልጣል ውጭ ካለውና እንደዚህ እውነት ይሆናል ሁሉም ነገር ነበር ግጥምጥም ያለው ልክ ለወደ ራስሽ እንዳነገርኩሽ አልተውም አንድ ቀን እንደሚሆን አውቃለሁ በጣም አመን ስለነበረ ነው እውነትም የሆነው እዚህ ሀገር ስትመጪ ብዙ የሚጎትቱ ነገሮች አሉ ፋይናንሻሊ ራስሽን ሰፖርት ለማድረግ ጥፍት ነው የሚያደርገው ምናምንና ግን በጣም እምነቱ ስለነበረኝ በብዙ ነገር ተሳካ ፋይናንሻሊ ኤቭሪቲንግ እውነት እንዲሆን ሆነ እና ራሳቸው ላይ ይመኑ ነው ምለው
ልክ ነው ጽፈሽ አሳትመሹ ተሽጦ አልቆ እንደገና አሁን ፐብሊሽ ለማድረግ ታስቢያለሽ ነው የሰማሁት
አዎ እውነት ነው ሁለተኛቱም ለማሳተም እየተነጋገርኩ ነው ያ
ጎበዝ በጣም ደስ የሚል ነገር ነው ይሄ በራስሽ መኩራት ያለብሽ ነገር ነው አይ ሆፕ ከዚህም በላይ ሌላ የመጽሐፍ ሐሳብ እንደሚኖርሽ አልጠራጠርም እና እንግዲህ good luck
thank you በጣም አመሰግናለሁ ሄለን
of course እንኳን ደስ አለሽ እኔ በጣም ኢንጆይ ያደረኩት መጽሐፍ ነው
thank you so much
all right ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ከረፍት ቆይታችን በኋላ እንመለሳለን ከኛ ጋር ቆዩ ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ከረፍት ቆይታችን ተመልሰናል አሁን ደግሞ ሌላ እናትና ልጅ ደራሲያን አስተዋውቃችኋለሁ ዴብራ ሃይሌ ልጇ ደግሞ ጆና ሲዩም የ8 አመት ልጅ እንግዲህ ጆና መጽሐፍ የጀመረው በ5 አመቱ ግን በ7 አመቱ ደግሞ የመጀመሪያ ትንሽ በእድሜ ትንሹ ልጅ መጽሐፍ ደራሲ የሚል ሽልማት አግኝቶ ነበር እንግዲህ ጆና የአሜሪካን ሀገር ልጅ ነው ቆይታችንን ከጆና ጋር ምናደርገው በእንግሊዝኛ ይሆናል ማለት ነው welcome Deborah and Jonah to our program
Thank you so much for having us Helen we're excited to be here
wonderful and congratulations on such an accomplishment an author since 5 years old and now at 8 years old already published a series the book I guess he has a couple of books, right? Basketball or Soccer is one of them, and then the other one is Jonah's Global Footprint. Am I correct? That's the series book?
Yep, that's so the book series is what we started. We started writing our book series when he was 5, like you said. And we have three books in our book series, Jonah's Global Footprints. And then he has written his own when he was 6 years old, and then he finished it at 7. And that was the Basketball or Soccer. And then now he has his own another solo one coming out. What does Daddy do all day this month, actually. So in total 5 books that we worked on together.
That's serious, Jonah. So tell me, what prompted you into writing a book? How did you even think about writing a book and publishing a book?
Well, I wanted to write a book because me and my mom write books about traveling, and she encouraged me to write my own book about what I like to do. Because traveling is what we both like to do. And I wrote my book, Basketball or Soccer, of what I want to do. Of what I like to do.
You enjoy doing?
Yeah.
So these stories come to you and you just sit down and start writing them? Tell me how your writing works. What's the process for you, for Jonah?
So first, I think of ideas of what to write of. Then I start writing it. Then after, the part of the process is you have to make the process and go, and then you ask your parents to give it to an editor, and then they edit it, and you have illustrations, and then you have a book.
And then you go through the whole story too, back and forth, right? To make it interesting. Yeah. So I kind of challenge him to see when he comes up with ideas, I kind of challenge him to see, okay, now I ask him questions to make him think about, okay, how, if you were the reader, what would you want to, what would make you curious, and then he starts to think about it more. He got more, I think, inspired to write. When did you write it? When did you write your first book?
My first book by myself, I wrote it when I was 6, and it was published when I was 7.
And it was during when, though?
it was during COVID.
Because he was home.
Yeah, I was home all day, and I didn't want to just sit there and do nothing. So I decided to write a book.
That's wonderful. Do you have a say-so on the, when the illustrator does, the pictures, do you tell them what you like, what you don't like? How much involved are you in that process?
Yeah, for the illustrators, like, I tell them, like, you can add this and that, but I don't like this, so don't add that or this. Like, you tell them.
How do you communicate with them, usually?
I usually email.
Yeah.
Oh.
With my computer.
Yeah, so you email them instructions, because he sees me to do that with our books. So then from that, I used to make sure to like include him in that process. So which is what made him, okay, he's like, okay, let me communicate with them. And then when we talk to the editors even, he's like, oh, let me talk to them. Let me tell them what I'm thinking too. So he has a lot to say during, with his solo book, he definitely contributes a lot. And he has a lot to say with our books together as well. And he gives his ideas, opinions, and he communicates also clearly with the editors and other illustrators that we work with as well.
So not only are you learning how to write a book, but you're also learning how to communicate with adults. You're learning how to make decisions. So this is very big. So Deborah, tell us, any inspiration from mothers? How do we help our kids become creative or pursue whatever it is? Now, writing is Jonah's. Other kids could be many different, creative things that they want to do. What advice do you give for parents?
I think it's to challenge them and to expose them and to show them adventures really in life and give them opportunities. I am not one who thinks that only learning is not only in a classroom. Learning is also like adventuring around the world, adventuring within your home, within your neighborhoods and family, and just giving them opportunities. Exposure really opens doors for children and opens their minds and what they're really interested in. So by giving them exposures, I think that's when they are always interested and excited to, talk, to do more with what they are, what their abilities are. Our books started this adventure of writing for us, but then now we published our first podcast together last year in 2021. I'm like, what year are we? And in 2021, we published our first podcast, and we do it together. And there, he's also talking to adults. We travel a lot. That's why we started writing. And so our podcast is about traveling the world with a child who he's been to 11 countries now, and also writing books with your child, also exposing them. And now in the podcast, he's saying and talking and communicating to a broad audience of what he enjoys to do, but also how he's putting it in writing. So that exposure is really opening his mind to things. And we don't know what our kids are going to be when they grow up. So the only thing we can control right now is just exposing them to everything, teaching them, showing them, adventuring with them, and just making them your little partners. It takes them like a long way when they feel involved in the process. With the podcast, he's, the main, I think you talk more than me in the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Well, I can see that. He's very good at expressing himself. So I love that. So what we're learning from Jonah is it's never really too early to pursue your passion, to pursue your dreams. Where can people find your book, Jonah?
You guys can find it on Amazon. Just search up our series name, Jonah's Global Footprints, and it'll show up. You can also find it on our website, tinyglobalfootprints.com.
Well, that's wonderful.
And our Instagram too, right? Yeah. Our Instagram account, which is Tiny Global Footprints. Our company, our brand is called Tiny Global Footprints, which I'm the CEO and he's the co-CEO. Just like with our books, I'm the author and he's the co-author of our books. Host and co-host of our podcast. So we have many ventures that came up because we really adventured together. So
I love that.
That evolved. So it's been an amazing experience. And yes, like he said, tinyglobalfootprints.com and Tiny Global Footprints on Instagram are the best ways to reach us.
Wonderful. The dynamic duo, mother-son. I love it. Well, thank you for making the time. And I hope you continue your series. And hopefully one day it might even become a little cartoon TV show or something. I don't know, because the stories are very interesting.
It's evolving. Who knows what the future brings, right? So
exactly.
Thank you for having us, Helen. We really appreciate it. It's been a great
episode. My pleasure. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Deborah and Jonah. ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ከረፍት ቆይታችን በኋላ እንመለሳለን። ከኛ ጋር ቆዩ። ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ከረፍት ቆይታችን ተመልሰናል። እንግዲህ እስካሁን ያደረግነው ቆይታ ከደራሲያኖች ጋር ነበር። አሁን ደግሞ ከመጽሐፉ ጀርባስ እነዚህን ደራሲያን ሰፖርት ለማድረግ ምን ነገሮች አሉ ምን አይነት environment መኖር አለበት አዳዲስ ቴክኖሎጂስ በተመለከተ የሚመጡ ደራሲያንን ሰፖርት የሚያደርጉ ሁኔታዎች አሉ ወይ የሚለውን ስናስብ የጋበስኩላችሁ እንግዶች እንግዲህ አፍሮሪድስ የሚባል አፕ creators ናቸው ማንበብ በአገራችን ሙሉ ሰው ያደርጋል ይባላል መጽሐፍ ሰውን ይቀይራል ማንነታችንን ይቀይራል አይምሮአችንን ይከፍታል እኔ አንድ ደስ የሚለኝ ነገር ያየሁት አይገስ ጥሩም መጥፎም ሳይድ ይኖረዋል አገራችን መጽሐፍ በየመንገዱ ይሸጣል መኪናን ያንኳኩ መጽሐፍ ግዙ የሚሉ አሉ ግን ምን ያህል ደራሲዎቻችንን እየጠቀምን ነው ጊዜያቸውን አጥፍተው ራሳቸውን ሰውተው መጽሐፍ ጽፈው ሲያቀርቡ መጽሐፉ በምን ሁኔታ እነሱ ለለፉት ለልፋታቸው ኮምፐንሴትድ ይሆናሉ አይደለ የሚገባቸውንስ ያገኛሉ ወይ ከዛ የበለጠ ፈጠራ ያዙ እንዲመጡ ኢንካሬጅ እንዲደረጉ ማለት ነው ሶ አቶ ነብዩ ዮሴፍና አቶ ብዙነ ብርሃን ሁለታችሁ እንግዲህ ሶፍትዌር ኢንጂነርስ ፊልድ አይቲ ውስጥ ያላችሁ ቴክኖሎጂ ውስጥ ነው ስራችሁ እና አፍሮሪድ is an app እስቲ ንገሩኝ አንዳችሁ ከማን ብዙነ ካንተ ልጀምር አፍሮሪድስ ምንድነው ለምንስ ተፈጠረ ምንድነው ለደራሲያን ይዛችሁ የቀረባችሁት ለአንባቢውስ የቀረባችሁት ምንድነው
ሄለን ይሄን እድል ስለሰጠሽን በጣም ነው የምናመሰግነው እንግዲህ አፍሮሪድን ይዘን ስንመጣ በሶሳይቲያችን ውስጥ በሀገራችን ውስጥ በመጽሐፍ ዲስትሪቢዩሽን በኩል ያለውን ችግር አይተን ነው ደራሲያን አሁን በጣም እንደው ታዋቂ የተባለ ደራሲ ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ማክሲመም ኮፒ 2000 ወይ 3000 ከ5000 ኮፒ በላይ በአንድ ጊዜ የሚያሳትም ደራሲ የለም 110 ሚሊዮን ባለበት ህዝብ ውስጥ 5000 እና 6000 ኮፒ በጣም ትንሽ ነው ይሄ የሚያሳየው አንድ እንግዲህ ብዙ ተደራሽ ሆኖ ለሁሉም አንባቢ ሀገር ውስጥም ውጭም ላለው በብዙ ኮፒ ሆኖ ቢሸጥ ለደራሲው ህይወቱን ይቀይራል ሁለተኛ ያየነው ደግሞ የኮፒራይት ችግር ደራሲው መጽሐፉን ቢያሳትምም ከደራሲው እውቅና ውጪ ደግሞ አዲስ አበባ ውስጥ እየታተመ የደራሲውን ስራ አዋሳ ላይ መቀሌ ላይ ሌላ ከተማ ላይ ከደራሲው እውቅና ውጪ ሌላ ሰው ኮፒ አድርጎ ሲሸጥ
ያለ ደራሲው እኔኮ ሃሪ እንዴት ተኛላችኋል የሰው ስራ ተሰርቆ እንደዚህ እየተሰራ እኔ የማይገባኝ ነገር እሱ ነው እሺ
ይሄንን ኮንትሮል ማድረጊያ ምንም መንገድ የለም እና አብዛኞቹ የደራሲያን ህይወትን ስናየው እንግዲህ አብዛኞቹ በፓሽናቸው ብቻ ያሉ ሰዎች ናቸው በአሁኑ ሰዓት እየጻፉ ያሉት ወይ ህይወታቸውን ወይ መጽሐፍን መምረጥ እዛ ደረጃ ላይ ነው ያለውና አፍሮሪድ እንግዲህ በዚህ በመጽሐፍ ማሳተምና ስርጭት ውስጥ ያለውን ችግር ቢያንስ በዲጂታል መልክ አማራጭ በማምጣት አንድ የኮፒራይትን በማስጠበቅ ሁለት ደግሞ በአንድ ጊዜ ብዙ ኮፒን ከአገር ውጪም አገር ውስጥም ላለው ለማዳረስ በሚል ሳቤ የተዘጋጀ አፕ ነው ምናልባት ነብይም ተጨምረው ነገር ካለ
I think ስትናገር እዚህ ላይ ነብዩ ተቀጥልልኛል እዚህ ሀገር መጽሐፍ ማለት ለአውተርስ አሁን ለምሳሌ ሚሼል ኦባማ የራሷን ባዮግራፊ ጽፋ ነበር ሜሞር ጽፋ ነበር አይደለ እና by 2020 ስንት ነው ያለው ቅድም 11 ሚሊዮን ኮፒስ ተሽጧል ያ ማለት ፐብሊሸሩ ለሷ የሚከፈላት በዛ ውስጥ በልፋቷ በደንብ ኮምፐንሴትድ ሆናል በደንብ የሚገባትን አግኝታለች የተለያዩ ደግሞ first time authors አሁን እንደምናስ በፕሮግራማችን ዛሬ እንዳስተዋወቃችሁ ሁሉ first time authors ለመጀመሪያ ጊዜ የሚጽፉ ጻፊዎች ናቸው እና በዛ ላይ እንደው አንዳለ ኢንደስትሪውን ራሱ ስንመለከት ምን ያህል ዲስፓሪቲ እንዳለ ማለት ነው አይደለ ነብዩ ምን ተጨምራለህ ስለ አፍሮሪድ
I think ብዙና በደራሲያን በኩል ያለውን በደንብ ገልጾታል በአንባቢያን በኩልም ደግሞ ትልቅ የአክሰስ ችግር አለ ብዙነና እኔ አሁን ከኢትዮጵያ ትላንትና የመጣ ነው ብዙነ ዛሬ ጧት ቴሌግራም ላይ ደረሱ ሜሴጆች ይሄን መጽሐፍ ይዘልኝና ይሄን I'm sure ብዙ ሰው ኤክስፒሪየንስ ነው so አንደኛው underlying problem ችግር እንደዚህ ለኮፒራይት ቫዮሌት እንዲሆን የሚያደርገው የመጽሐፍ አክሰስ ባለመኖሩም ነው ሶ አንደኛውም ችግር በደራሲ በኩልም በአንባቢያንም በኩል ያለውን ችግር ለመፍታት ነው
ይሄ መጣው እንግዲህ ያው አሁን አገራችን በቴክኖሎጂ እየገፋች ነው ስለ በባንኪንግ በኩል ስንመለከት ቴክኖሎጂ በጣም እየገፋ ነው ሰው እያመነ ነው በባንክ ገንዘባቸውን በስልካቸው የማዘዋወር በስልካችን ብዙ ነገር ወደምንሰራበት ሁኔታ እየደረስን ነው አይኖ ብዙዎቻችን ብዙ ጊዜያችንን በፌስቡክ እና በኢንስታግራም እናጠፋለን ስልካችን ላይ ግን በዛ በስልካችን ዕውቀት ደግሞ ከመጽሐፍ የሚመጣ መዝናኛ ደግሞ ማግኘት የምንችልበት እድል ነው ማለት ነው ይሄ ነገር ማንንም ሰው ከየትም ቦታ አፑን ዳውንሎድ ማድረግ ይችላል ማለት ነው
አፍሮሪድ አፕ እንግዲህ ከየትም ቦታ ዳውንሎድ ተደርጎ በስልክ ላይ ወይም በታብሌት ላይ መጽሐፍን ማንበብ ወይም ደግሞ በድምጽ የተተረከ ከሆነ በኦዲዮ መልክ የሚሰማበት አፕሊኬሽን ነው አሁን ከኢትዮጵያ ኮሚኒቲ ከኢትዮጵያ ውጪ ያለው ኮሚኒቲ በክሬዲት ካርድ እንደማንኛውም አፕ መጽሐፉን ገዝቶ መስማት ወይም ማድመጥ ይችላል ኢትዮጵያ ላለው አንባቢ ደግሞ አሁን በቅርብ ከኢትዮጵያን ቴሌኮሙኒኬሽን ጋር የቴሌብርን የመክፈያ ስርዓት ኢንተግሬት አድርገን አሁን በሁለት ሳምንታት ውስጥ ለኢትዮጵያ ተጠቃሚዎች በብር የሚገዙበትን ሁኔታ እናመቻቻለን አፑን እንግዲህ ስንሰራው read listen cultivate the mind የሚል ሞቶ ይዞ ነው ያለው ያ ማለት ምን ማለት ነው እንግዲህ አሁን ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ በአብዛኛው ወጣቱ አያነብም የማንበብ ባህሉ የለም የሚል ባንድ ወገን ወቀሳ አለ በሌላ በኩል ደግሞ የመጽሐፍ ስርጭቱ የለም ስለዚህ ወጣቱንም ያነባል አያነብም የሚለውንም ራሱ ለመመዘን መጀመሪያ መጽሐፎችን ተደራሽ ማድረግ አለብንና እንደ አንድ አማራጭ በፔፐር ያለውን ሰብስቲዩት አይደለም የሚያደርገው ግን እንደ አንድ አማራጭ እንግዲህ እነኚህን መጽሐፍቶች ሁሉም የስልክ አብዛኛው ሰው ስማርት ስልክ ተጠቃሚ ነውና እጃቸው ላይ ማድረስ ኢንፎርሜሽንን ዲሞክራታይዝ ማድረግ ብለን እናምናለን እና በሂደት የሚያነብ አንብቦ የሚወያይ በእውቀት ላይ መሰረት ያደረገን እንግዲህ ትውልድ ከመፍጠር አንፃርም በኩላችንና አሻራ አስተዋጽኦ እናደርጋለን ብለን እናስባለን
ከደራሲዎች እንግዲህ ስታነጋገሩ ደራሲዎች ብዙ የምትሰሙት ነገር ምንድነው are they receptive እናንተን የናንተ ያመጣችሁት አፕለኛ ይሰራልናል ነው አይሰራልንም ከደራሲዎች ብዙ የምትሰሙት ምንድነው
በጣም በሚገርም ሁኔታ ደራሲያን በጣም receptive ናቸው በጣም ተቀባይ ናቸው ለዚህ ሐሳብ በጣም ቪዥነሪ የሆኑ ማለት አንካፋ የሚባሉ ደራሲያን መጀመሪያ ስናነጋግራቸው ከ30 የሚሆኑ ከዛ በላይ የሆኑ ደራሲያን ዋን ኦን ዋን እንደዚህ በዙም ሚት አርገናቸው የነሱን ትረስት የነሱን ብሌሲንግ አግኝተን ነው ወደዚህ እንትን የገባ ነው ቬንቸር ሶ በዛ ነገር በጣም ሪሰፕቲቭ ናቸው ገብቷቸዋል ሐሳቡ ባለም ዙሪያ ያለው አንባቢያቸውን እንደሚደርሱበት አምነውበታል
እና ኮፒራይት ኢሹን እንዴት ፕሮቴክት ታረጋላችሁ
ኮፒራይት እንግዲህ ዋና መሰረታዊ ነገር ነውና አፑን ስንሰራ ዲጂታል ኮፒራይት ማስጠበቂያ የራሱ መንገድ አለውና ያንን ገና ከመጀመሪያው ታሳቢ አድርገን ነው አፕሊኬሽኑን የሰራ ነው የደራሲዎችን እንግዲህ አብዛኞቹን ደራሲዎች ስናነጋግር ኃላፊነት ነው የሰጡን በዚህ መልክ በመምጣታችን የነሱን ችግር አንደርስታንድ ስላደረግን ደስ ብሏቸዋልም at the same time ደግሞ ይሄ የሆነ የላይፍ ታይም ሪስፖንሲቢሊቲ ነው ያሉን ይሄ ባጭር ጊዜ እንግዲህ ወዲያው ልክ እንደ ኮሞዲቲ ተሸጦ የሆነ ትርፍ የሚያመጣ ቢዝነስ አይደለም የመጽሐፍ ሽያጭ ገና ይሄ በዲጂታል የማንበብን ካልቸራል ሽፍት አምጥተን ወደፊት ከስኬል እኛም ደራሲያንም በዚህ በኢኮሲስተም ውስጥ ያሉ ሁሉ ሰዎች የሚጠቀሙበት ቢዝነስ ብለን ያሰብነውና እነሱም ያንን ተረድተውታል እና ጀምራችሁ እንዳታቆሙት
ኦኬ
ይሄ እንደውም ሪተርናችሁን የምታገኙት ከልጆቻችሁ
ልክ ነው አሁን ይገኝ ነገር
አይደለም እና ይሄንን አውቃችሁ መግባት አለባችሁ የሚል ኢቭን ኃላፊነት ነው የሰጡን ከነሱ ጋር ስንወያይ
ያ እኔ እንግዲህ አሁን በተለይ ሳመር አሁን ይመጣል ተማሪዎች ከረፍት ቤት ነው ያሉት እንደው አንድ ይሄ ራሱ ለወላጆች የሚጠቅም ነገር ነው ለልጆቻቸው አፑን ዳውንሎድ ማድረግ ከቻሉ ይሄንን ያህል መጽሐፍ በዚህ ሳመር ውስጥ ይሄን ያህል መጽሐፍ ካነበብክ ይሄንን ይሆንልሃል የሚለው ነገር ራሱ ይሄ this is something that anybody ልጆቻችን already ፈለግንም አልፈለግንም ስልካቸው ላይ ብዙ ጊዜ ብዙ ሰዓት ያጠፋሉ አንዱንስ ወስደው ቢጠቀሙበት የሚለው ነገር ነውና እስቲ ምንድነው ቻሌንጁ የምትሉት እናንተ ሰው ይሄንን ነገር ተቀባይነት አምሹር የሚኖረው ይመስለኛል በደንብ ሰው ሲረዳው ግን ምንድነው አስቸጋሪው ነገር ይሄንን ስራ ስትሰሩ እናንተ
ከኛ በኩል እኛ እንግዲህ የቴክኖሎጂ ባለሙያ ነን ከቴክኖሎጂ በኩል ምንም ምንፈራው ችግር የለም የካምፓኒያችን ስም ስንመሰረተው ራሱ ግዙፍ ዲጂታል ሰርቪስ ነው ምን ማለት ነው it's a social entrepreneur company ነው ገዘፍ ያሉ የሶሳይቲውን ፕሮብሌሞች ኢምፓክት ሊያመጡ በሚችሉ የቴክኖሎጂ ሶሉሽን ፕሮዳክቶችን ዴቨሎፕ ማድረግ ነውና አፍሮሪድ እንግዲህ አንዱ የመጀመሪያው ፕሮዳክት ነው እንግዲህ ለወላጆች የምንለው አብዛኛው ሰው ዲጂታሊ ስልክ ላይ ነው ያለው ይሄንን እንግዲህ ማስቀረት የሚቻል አይመስለኝም ይልቅ ከቴክኖሎጂው ጋር እንዴት ነው ይሄንን ቴክኖሎጂ ለጥሩ ነገር ሁሉም ሰው መጠቀም የሚችለው ነገር ሞር ማስተማር ነው የሚሻለው ብለን እናምናለንና ከዛ አንፃር ወላጆች እንግዲህ ልጆቻቸውን አንደኛ ለራሳቸውም ቴክኖሎጂውን አቮይድ ማድረግ ሳይሆን ቴክኖሎጂውን በመጠቀም ለልጆቻቸው ምሳሌ በመሆን ቤት ውስጥ አብረው አንድ መጽሐፍ ፒክ አድርገው ማንበብ ይችላሉ መወያየት ይችላሉ ከልጆቻቸው ጋር ባክ ኤንድ ፎርስ ኢንጌጅ ማድረግ ይችላሉ ያንን እድል ይሰጣቸዋል ብለን እናስባለን ወጣት ደግሞ በአሁኑ ሰዓት ስልኩ ላይ ነው ያለው በዩቲዩብ በተለያዩ ነገሮችን ያያሉና መጽሐፍንም ማንበብና ማድመጥንም ደግሞ እንደ ባህል ቢያደርጉት እንመክራለን
ልክ ነው ሶ እንዴት ማግኘት ይችላሉ አፑ
በአፕል ስቶር በጉግል ፕሌይም አፕል ስቶር አቬለብል ነው
ኦኬ
አፍሮሪድ ብሎ ሰርች ቢያደርጉ ያገኙታል ኦኬ ዌብሳይታችን ላይ afroreadapp.com እዛ ላይ ሁለቱም ሊንክ አለ
ኦኬ ጉድ በነጻም መጽሐፎች አሉ not everything ይገዛም አይደለም
የተወሰኑ መጽሐፍቶች በነጻ ከደራሲዎች በበጎ ፈቃደኝነት የተሰጡን ነው አንዱ ነገር እኛ እዚህ ጋር ስንሰራ ኮፒ አድርገን ወይም አይደለም ሁሉም ከደራሲዎች ጋር በደራሲዎች ፈቃድ ሌላው ደግሞ ቅድም ያልገለጽነው ነገር አፍሮሪድ አንዱ ሶልቭ የሚያደርገው የዲስትሪቢዩሽን ኮስቱን በመሃል በደራሲውና አንባቢያን ጋር እስኪደርስ ድረስ የህትመት ዋጋ በጣም ውድ ነው ዲስትሪቢዩሽን ኤጀንቶች በጣም ብዙ አለና ያንን አትሊስት ኤሊሚኔት አድርገን ኮስቱን ሚኒማይዝ አድርገን እንግዲህ አፑን ዳውንሎድ አድርገው እንዲጠቀሙ እንጋብዛለን
ማንበብ እንዳልነው ቅድም ማንነታችንን የሚቀይረን ነገር ነው በተቻለ መጠን ደግሞ ደራሲዎቻችንን እንደግፋቸው አይዟችሁን ባላቸው ይሄ እንግዲህ የማይሆን ኮፒራይት ቫዮሌት የሚያደርግ ነገር አንገዛም በማለትኛ እንደ ህብረተሰብ ማንነታቸውን አውቀን ለመደገፍኛ ከተነሳን እነዚህ ደግሞ ኮፒራይት ቫዮሌት የሚያደርጉትን ሰዎች ደግሞ ሆፕፉሊ ከመንግስት ጋር በመሆን የሚገባቸውን ቅጣት እየደረሰባቸው ስራቸውን ቢያቆሙ ደስ ይለናል ቴንክ ዩ ጊዜያችሁን ወስዳችሁ ከኛ ጋር ቆይታ ስላደረጋችሁ ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ የዛሬ ፕሮግራማችን በዚህ ላይ ያበቃል በሚቀጥለው ሳምንት በሌላ ፕሮግራም እስከምንገናኝ ደህና ቆዩልን